Welcome to the Books Brothers podcast. I'm your host, Flez, and I'm here with the squad.
I'm Adam.
I'm your boy, Rob.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Garrett.
Today we're cracking open Endurance by Alfred Lansing, aka the OG survival manual for when life decides to body slam you. Here's the deal. Shackleton and his crew get stuck in Antarctica because apparently someone thought it was a good idea to take a wooden ship into an ice-filled blender. Spoiler alert, it does not go well. But instead of curling up in a ball and crying like I would, Shackleton steps up like a boss and turns their impossible situation into an epic story of survival. This book is about leadership, resilience, and the kind of brotherhood that makes you ask, would I share my last protein bar with these guys? Before we dive in, here's a question to warm us up. What's the dumbest situation you've ever gotten yourself into, and how did you get out of it?
This is going to be recorded.
Let me get it. I'll lead so you guys can have a second to think. This is the first thing I thought of, but it's not really. I'm sure I've surely done dumber things, but it's a kind of a funny story. So, are you guys familiar with the game Hostage?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Hostage, what you do is one person. There's two teams. One person from one team goes in the car, the other team, and vice versa. So you have one person from each team in the other car. You then blindfold that person, you drive to a random place, and you drop them off blindfolded, and then essentially like you drive away, you leave them there blindfolded, and then the game is you have to find the person, whoever can find their person on their team quickest. So we were doing this one time. Adam, I think you were there. Were you there?
Sounds familiar, yeah.
So we were doing this one time, and so first off, we didn't have the foresight to have blindfolds, so our buddy had his shirt off and it wrapped around his face. So he's shirtless with it wrapped around his face, and we didn't immediately. Once we pulled away, a cop pulled us over, like had been tracking us for like a mile, and was like, "What?" Like they were like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And our buddy Miles like starts running at the cop car with his hands. So he's the one who's like the hostage. He's blindfolded with his shirt off. Starts running towards the cop car, still blindfolded with his hands up in the air. And so then we had to explain to these cops what we were doing. So I've probably done dumber things, but this is one I think of that it's like, oh man, that's just a stupid high school.
That's funny.
Super fun game, but
The only thing that comes to mind is it's not even me. It's Garrett just standing there in the chapter house with a bag of poop. We're going to put it on Trent's car and we're going to have a group of people do it. But Garrett was the only one who actually pooped. He pooped into a plastic bag and he walked out in the hallway. He's just holding the bag and he's just like, what's everyone else doing? Why am I the only one who pooped in a bag? What am I going to do with this?
What kind of plastic bag was it? Was it like a Ziploc?
Like a grocery bag, I think.
A grocery bag.
All right, guys, before Rob's left brain totally explodes, my dumb story, kind of getting back to sort of the book, but I wore like E6 tennis shoes when I was working for FedEx and like thin socks. And one night it snowed and iced, and I got stuck in like the 1970s box truck that had like 400,000 miles on it and no heat. And I just remember pulling up and stopping, and I got like 6 pair of socks from a shoe carnival on my route, and they just got drenched immediately. So that didn't help. And then I pulled up. I stopped. If you're from St. Louis, I was on Utah and Grand, and I just took my shoes off and straddled the steering wheel and put my feet up on the dash so that the defrost could hit my feet. So that's one of the dumbest. It's probably not the dumbest situation I've ever gotten myself into, but one of. And it just made me think of how cold these guys must have been. So moving on, let's go to the summary. Back in the day, the world was obsessed with exploring the ends of the earth. Nations were competing to conquer Antarctica like it was some kind of extreme sport. Shackleton was no rookie. He'd already tried to reach the South Pole twice. The first time, he nearly froze to death. The second time, he came within 97 miles of glory, but had to turn back because, food is important. Fast forward to 1915, Shackleton's got a new dream, crossing the entire Antarctic continent on foot. He's like, third time's the charm, right? Wrong. The Endurance gets trapped in ice, and suddenly this trip isn't about glory. It's about not dying. Cue the real adventure. So here's the quick and dirty breakdown. Chapter 1, the Endurance gets wrecked by ice. Shackleton's like, well, boys, guess we're living on the ice now. Chapter 2, Shackleton shifts gears from explorer to survival guru. He keeps everyone calm, even though they're literally in the middle of nowhere. Chapters 3 to 5, it's 6 months of darkness. 6 months. The crew keeps busy with routines and activities, probably to avoid losing their minds. Chapters 6 to 8, the ice starts to thaw, but instead of freedom, the Endurance gets crushed like a soda can. Shackleton's all, time to abandon ship, grab the sled dogs, and let's hustle. Lansing's writing really does put you right in the action. You can feel the cold, hear the ship groaning, and almost smell the penguins. It's intense, but also oddly inspiring. So the first question is going to be about leadership under pressure. Shackleton didn't just hold it together, he thrived under pressure. While most of us would be crying into our jackets, he kept his crew focused and hopeful. What's a time when you had to step up and lead, even if you didn't feel ready? And be honest, did you crush it or was it a total dumpster fire?
Well, first off, dude, these summaries are epic.
I think there have been a lot of times in my life when I've been in that situation. The one that comes to mind is helping to lead the youth group, Garrett. We co-led this youth group while we were in Springfield, and it was terrifying for me being in that leadership position as part of the staff, leading a group of high school and middle school students at a church when I was only less than a year older than the oldest high school students. And I don't know, people might have different opinions on how it went. I thought it went okay. The first year or so was really great before Garrett went off to China and left me all alone. And then I really had to step up and take the leadership all by myself. But I really did enjoy it for the most part. It was extremely challenging, really hard, and I was definitely out of my comfort zone. But it was really cool to just be a part of those kids' lives and share the gospel with them and teach them about the Bible and Jesus. And I'm really proud of that. I think looking back, I would have done it a lot differently now that I'm more mature and have been in leadership positions since then. I think parts of it were a dumpster fire because I just didn't know what I was doing. But other parts of it were really great.
You did a great job, Matt.
No, thanks.
So my answer is the same as what I was thinking of answering for your first time of when you were in a crazy situation, you didn't know how to get out of it. And I was like, is anyone else going to bring it up? But for me, it was formal. 2012, when things just got a little out of hand, and I was president at the time, and we went to like the executive leadership conference and stuff, and you learn like risk management strategies and whatnot if something happens, a crisis situation. But it's like another thing to live it out. And very vividly remember talking to the hotel/resort owner, if you want to call it a resort. And he's like, yeah, I really don't want to do this, but I'm really going to just have to call the police because so much stuff is stolen and broken. And I'm like, oh man, like this is getting real. And yeah, there were people who were like, you better not say anything. And there were other people who were like, we need to like admit what we did and just face the music. So I was kind of getting advice from all sides, I guess. So it was a stressful ordeal, and yeah, it was hard making some phone calls to the head of Greek life on campus. Like, hey, just let you know, there's a situation, we're dealing with it. Calling the alumni chapter advisory board and like, hey, this is what happened. And then obviously having meetings and dealing with all of the, hey, return all the stuff that you stole, things like that. And it was just kind of a crazy situation. That was something that came to mind, both for your first question, Flez, and then this one. So I thought I'd share.
Garrett, just for sake of context, obviously there was a lot of damage that was done at the hotel we stayed at for formal. Do you recall the number, like the dollar amount?
I remember it's funny the stuff you remember. It was $6,000 just for the keys.
Okay.
Because for whatever reason, at like the restaurant area of the hotel, the owner left one massive ring of keys to every room, and someone stole that. And I remember that he's like, yeah, it's going to cost $6,000 to rekey every room. And I want to say, now the other caveat is he took advantage of the situation because like our room was already damaged when we got there. Like I know for sure we did not damage anything because no one in our room. I think I was with Repo and like none of us even drank. So I know for a fact we did not damage anything in our room. And he charged us a bunch of money to fix the door and stuff like that. And I think it was like another $6,000. So I think it was like 12 to 14 total.
Yeah. I still just remember walking into one of the hotel rooms and the toilet was pulled off of the ground. It was in the middle of the room.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Holy cow.
Wait, it was like that when you got there or someone did that?
No, I remember like someone broke the toilet, like pulled it off the ground and it was like in the middle of the room.
Oh my gosh.
So this kind of reminds me, like, I know I'm getting off topic with your question, but it's around the company of the ship. But I guess in this situation, the company that we kept, I guess, in the fraternity too. One, I think it's hilarious that there was just some stowaway person that just somehow made it onto the ship.
Snuck on.
Like there's only 28 people, 27 people on the ship, but somebody lets on some nobody. I thought that was funny.
Because he was super young too. He was like barely 18.
In his low 20s or something.
No, I think he was 18. I think he had like he was
really?
Yeah. And that was part of the issue is he was so young.
So it made it sound like Shackleton literally picked, like he strategically picked some of these people, some of these 27 people. But some of them, it was like the guy maybe didn't even have any experience, but was like, yep, you're hired. Great. Thanks for considering. So it's like he literally made
him laugh or something.
Like he just liked his aura or whatever. Made decisions in like 5 minutes of like, yep, these are the guys I'm going to war with. And I just found that so interesting. It kind of made me reflect on, in my role, like I've hired people at our company. I've interviewed a number of people for roles within our company. And it's a little comical that we spend 60, mainly like towards 120 minutes. So 2 hours with like candidates. And then we make a determination of like, all right, we're going to believe pretty much most of what you said if you delivered it with confidence. Like, I'm going to believe that you can do these things that you're saying you've done in the past. I'm going to believe that when I ask you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to take it maybe at face value, depending on everything else that you're telling me about yourself. So it's just like you see it play out in the real world. We kind of like make gut decisions off of a little bit of knowledge, and we take it at face value, or we sniff it out if it totally feels like a lie. But just like how we kind of hitch our saddle to people off of just a couple of conversations.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling to me, especially in this situation, because this is such a life or death situation that you really want to have the right people on board. And I just found it so comical how like laissez-faire he was about, all right, you want to come? Great.
Well, I think too, so I pulled this up because I wanted to share it. I've seen this before. I don't think they mentioned it, but so this is the advertisement that Shackleton ran for the crew. If you guys recall, there was a ton of applicants. So basically they had their choice. But this was the ad that was ran in papers throughout the country. So men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success.
That sounds terrible.
But a pretty epic ad. Basically, you're like saying this is going to be awful. But if you do it and we succeed, your name's going to be like spoken well of and remembered. And, Rob, with what you were saying, I totally agree with all of that. But it definitely, like, you see the type of people. He was looking for a type of people more than anything in this scenario, where he wanted crazy people, essentially.
Yeah, like, if you apply, you're crazy and we need crazy.
Yeah.
Going back to that stowaway real quick, when Shackleton was berating him and he's like, just to let you know, if we run out of food, we are eating you first.
Yeah.
And then, like, I'm thinking about it as, like, time is ticking when their ship is stuck. I wonder what that guy is thinking. Like, every day, it's like, oh, shoot, like, we might actually... Was he being serious? Like, are we going to run out of food here? You know?
Yeah.
All right, so imagine living in freezing darkness for 6 months. You can't scroll Instagram or TikTok. You can't DoorDash a pizza. It's just you, the cold, and your bros. Shackleton knew mental strength was just as important as physical strength, so he kept their minds busy. When life hits you with the unexpected, how do you keep your head in the game? Is it routines, distractions, or just sheer stubbornness?
I love the camaraderie that all these guys were doing. You know, like it didn't really sound like they had many like games or distractions. I think they got a hold of some.
They played hockey, it sounded like, for a while.
Yeah, they did.
But then once it was dark out, they couldn't.
I think they late found like some dice, right? And so they like finally started getting into some gambling, which I kind of expected, you know, a group of 28 dudes that was going to come into play, but they were shaving their heads and dressing up for the, what was it? The midnight celebration or the midsummer celebration. And it was just funny to see how they distracted themselves during that tough time. I think, to get to your question, keeping your head in the game, I think routine has always been something big for me. It's kind of what keeps me grounded. It's, you know, you like going on vacation and getting away from the routine, but then coming back home is like, it kind of allows you to get settled back in to the craziness that being away from the routine was. And that kind of always grounds me of just like getting back into, you know, dieting and working out and prayer and things like that kind of sustain you. So for me, that's kind of how I would answer that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rob. I think if you don't make plans, like if you don't plan to succeed, like you're already like planning to fail. And just like a real life scenario this morning, I stayed up a little bit later than I should have last night and was meeting a friend at 5 this morning to run. So that meant waking up at 4:30 to go meet him. And the whole drive there, it's not like, I live in Phoenix, so it's not cold, but it was like 40 out. So it's kind of cold. And the whole time I'm driving there, in my mind, I keep saying, like, I don't want to run this morning, but I do want to be the kind of person that runs this morning. And so it kind of plays on like the habit nature of it, where it's like, this is going to be awful, but like afterwards, like it's going to feel great. And Rob, you mentioned camaraderie. I was meeting a friend this morning. If I wasn't meeting a friend this morning to run at 5, chances are I probably would have skipped out on it.
I would lean more towards distractions. Routines do come into play, but when life hits you with the unexpected, I think my default is to distract myself with reading or not thinking about the situation, watching TV, playing video games, talking about other things other than the situation until I've had enough time to think about it and come up with a good way to go about the situation. I'm big on taking time to think about situations before just jumping in, especially if it's a big decision or something that's really, really impactful, or if it's something that makes me angry. I don't want to jump into a solution. I'd rather take the time to think about it, make sure my mind is clear, my mind is in the right space before making a decision. Distractions probably don't actually help with that, coming to a conclusion, because I'm not really thinking about it. I probably need to look into that for myself.
We can link to some therapists at the end of the episode.
There we go. Yeah. One thing that I've connected with this book and them being stranded just with absolutely nothing to do, no technology, very little things to entertain themselves with. That's something that as a parent, it's really cool to see when your kids, they don't have those technological distractions or things to do. When they're bored, that's when they're the most creative. And that's a big part of letting your kids grow, is letting them be bored so that they can come up with games themselves, learn how to interact with others themselves, and just let them be. So thinking about these guys on the ship, in theory, it actually sounds kind of nice to not have any of those distractions and just being with a group of people that you enjoy being with and just having fun together, coming up with silly games and doing whatever you can to pass the time. But then you think about the cold and no sun and how long they had to do it. And then it's just like, oh, that sounds miserable. And I would not sign up for this trip.
I mean, there were some parts of the book just I was cracking up and I was like, man, these guys are just having a blast, you know, and just the camaraderie component. It almost made you a little like envious of this type of experience, how grueling it was, how unifying it had to be, but how they probably had so many jokes and laughs and inside jokes and all these things that, like, imagine them getting together, you know, after this event, however many there will be, and just all the stories that they're going to have.
Well, when life hits me with the unexpected, I do cold exposure, so I would have been set.
For 30 minutes.
Yeah, what's the longest you've done cold exposure?
Dude, they said it was like in the negatives. It was 2 degrees above zero. That was the high for 7 months.
That's when they said they could go out and take their hat off. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hottest. That's the hottest they got. It's crazy.
Well, you know, when you come out of winter too, you come out of winter and you go outside and you're like, there was one winter where it was like brutal. And I remember filling up my car with gas and it was like 35 degrees and I was in shorts and I was like, man, 35 has never felt so good. But right now it's like you wake up and it's 40 degrees and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so cold.
I mean, it's relative, right?
Yeah.
If you're living in a cold place, you're going to get used to the cold. But I hear you. I hear you what you're saying, Robbie.
Shackleton could have been remembered as the guy who crossed Antarctica. Instead, he became the guy who saved his crew. Sometimes doing the right thing means giving up your dreams. When have you had to make a call between chasing your own goals and doing what's best for someone else? And looking back, do you think you made the right choice?
I think of parenthood with that. So if our daughter's like 16 months old, so very new to the game still. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I maybe hadn't really even considered about the sacrifices that would be required to be a parent and to parent well. I hope I'm doing parenting well. And yeah, that's something where you definitely have to put a lot of your self-interest on the back burner. And I mean, I think so far, definitely worth it for sure. Like seeing her smile, seeing her laugh. Sometimes like staying up late, keeping her up late, it's definitely worth it. But then other times where like it means that she's like feeling crummy the next day, you just feel really guilty, bad about it. But I think seeing this person develop is just, it's definitely worth it. Super fun.
That was essentially going to be my answer too.
But I think sometimes too, like the sake of sacrificing is what is formative, right? Even if like the end result for the other person that you sacrificed for doesn't pan out, it's not worthwhile. But I think the sacrifice is good.
I mean, I can relate though, where it's like you do sacrifice as the two guys here that don't have kids, like you do sacrifice for your family members, not for our son or daughter since we don't have one, but just for like our parents, our siblings, right? Like I came back to the Midwest specifically to be closer to my family so that I would be able to see them on the weekends versus, I could have stayed and pursued climbing the corporate ladder more seriously if I wanted to, but that was going to come at a cost where I wasn't going to be able to just jump in the car and be there in 2.5, 3 hours. Those are some of the sacrifices that I think of where, I want to be there for my family, be at a good proximity to them. And that comes at a cost that's worth sacrificing for too, where you can have both, where you can have a good career, but still be close to your family. And you don't have to sacrifice everything just to pursue one way.
Yeah, that's fair. I do want to be where I am in St. Louis because I want to spend time with my goddaughter whenever I can. So wouldn't be able to do that if I was somewhere else. If she wasn't around, then it'd be a lot easier to maybe justify moving It's Colorado or somewhere where I like to do more outside stuff. But yeah, like you said, you can have both. You can sacrifice for someone else, but still grow individually. So Shackleton knew the power of laughter. The crew put on talent shows, played the banjo, and even staged a mock trial. When everything sucks, humor can keep you going. What's the funniest thing you've seen someone do to lighten the mood in a tough situation?
Before kind of getting into that, Worsley was put on trial for robbing a Presbyterian church of a trouser button out of the offertory bag and having turned the same to base and ignoble use. So he stole a trouser button and then he used it for ignoble purposes, which are not described further. That's pretty good. Honestly, Adam, you asked this question. I cannot think of an exact example, but I just think of Thomas.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of someone who is very good at like keeping anything light and giving a laugh in a challenging moment, I think of Thomas. I think it's one of his, like, I mean, he's got a lot of great attributes, but it's like one that I'm like, I've always looked up. I've always thought that was so cool that he can, in kind of a challenging moment, just say something really silly and lighten the mood. I think of, I mean, like in college, he had like his box of just like ridiculous costumes and items of sorts. And then, yeah, you know, we mentioned it last week where we talked about he brought just like goofy hats and stuff for the trip out to Arizona.
Off of Temu.
Yeah, those orange sunglasses, which by the way, Daphne loves. We still have those. They sit on our like entry table, and Daphne puts them on probably every other or every third day, and it is hilarious. They're like orange rectangular glasses that she puts on. Sus? That's what she calls them. Sus? Like, are you being suspicious, Daphne? Is that what you're saying? Or
no joke. Brooke was, I can't even remember what she was trying to shop for, but whatever she was trying to get, she could apparently only find on Temu. And she was like, hey, Garrett, is this a legit site, Temu? And I was like, Thomas shops on it.
Which she probably question it more than anything.
Yeah,
like, maybe it's not.
So she's like, wait, so yes, she's like, and I go, I think he gets his stuff most of the time. I think Matt sometimes doesn't get some stuff. And then she's like, okay, what about this site? And I'm like, I have no idea. She's like, okay, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
There have been a couple times where Emily and I are having a really serious conversation and really emotional conversation late at night. And after we talked through a few things, sometimes I just feel like it's a good time to say a joke. So like,
fart.
We're both crying. She's crying. We just had this heart to heart. And then times it's just the right time to say a funny thing.
Yeah.
To lighten the mood, and it really lightens the mood, and it's great.
So I don't know if you're familiar with John Gottman, but he's like the Marriage Institute guy. He has a book that's the 7 Habits to basically make marriage work. And one of the things he talks about is one of the habits is he calls those like peace offerings. And it's just like a silly joke in the midst of like the storm where like one person's basically like saying like, yeah, I'm willing to like stop this argument if you are. We definitely do that too, Matt.
Nice. There's this story about my dad preaching on a Sunday morning a long time ago. I don't remember this, but pretty much my whole family does. He was going over the passage that was like, from dust you were formed and to dust you will return. And he had this very serious, like really good sermon, and he was at the very end of it. And it's like the super serious moment. And he said, if you take one thing away from this morning, just remember you are nothing. And he paused and he said, but dust. And then he paused even longer. And then you just hear this like trickle of giggles starting to come up because he said, but dust. Soon after, the whole room is laughing, and he's like, "That is not how I intended that to go," but that's what you remember. Butt dust.
Wait, so that was not intentional? He did not do that intentionally. Oh, that's even funnier.
Butt dust. All right, so here's what Shackleton's story teaches us, and yeah, it's stuff we can actually use in our own lives. Leadership, it's not about having all the answers, it's about staying calm and keeping the team together. Resilience, when life dumps you on the ice, routines, humor, and focus are your best friends. Brotherhood, a strong team can get through anything as long as there's trust. Humility, nature, and life doesn't care about your plans, respect it, adapt, and keep moving. To our listeners, think about your own life. Where have you shown endurance, and who's been your Shackleton when you needed one? Hit us up with your stories. Thanks for hanging with us for this episode of the Books Brothers podcast. Shackleton's story is just heating up or freezing over, depending on how you look at it. Next time, we'll talk about how the crew survives their insane journey across the ice. If this episode fired you up, share it with your crew and hit us up. How do you stay strong when life throws you a blizzard? Until next time, remember, don't be the guy who panics on the ice. Be Shackleton. Later, bros.
If you've enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect with. Lastly, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram at booksbrotherspodcast. Until next time, read, reflect, and connect.